Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Changing the Narrative podcast. I'm your co-host, Dr. Gabriel Warren, along with Carl Benson. And today we have with us another very special guest, Teron Buford. Teron, thanks for being a part of the podcast.
Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, um, I'm excited about this conversation because, this is my first time actually getting to meet you and talk to you a little bit
Yeah.
more. And, unlike some of our other guests, I may have known them from the past. So it's good to
Mm.
see that the podcast is expanding and we're getting to meet people that, maybe we have been able to kind of cross paths through other people. So
Yeah.
I like to start by just getting you to share a little bit with the listeners about who you are, what you do professionally, and
Yeah.
anything you'd like to share.
Yeah, I love it. I love, the new and organic meat, right? You don't have any expectations for me, right? So I can't like let you down. No, yeah, so my name is Teron. I won't bore you to death with the whole biography, but I originally from Chicago, have been in Minnesota now since what 2004-ish. Went to high school, finished my last few years of high school here, went to college here, met my wife here, got the family here, right? So this is now, for all intents and purposes, home. I started out my professional career in the recruitment space. So I spent about a decade in higher education, recruiting primarily students of color, BIPOC students, underserved, underrepresented students, helping them figure out, what's next for them after high school. I spent a few years leading DEI in the career placement sector for a bit, and now I'm leading DEI actually in the insurance sector. It's been a wild ride and kind of there's been so many different things that have kind of been placed in front of me to explore, and so it's been really cool. Been learning a whole lot, and I'm excited to see what kind of the next chapters hold.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like your some of your pictures in the background, your pictures of your family, man. So,
Yeah, yeah. I
that's an
keep
amazing background.
I keep my team with me, right? Like it's very intentional. I want people to know, right? What's big and important for me, but also when I'm on camera, I can see it too,
Yeah,
and it's my reminder for why we do this.
that's awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. You mentioned a moment ago, you find joy in empowering and providing resources to underrepresented and underserved
Yeah,
populations. Can you sort of share how you go about doing that and what's that look like in your day to day?
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of two-pronged, right? So I try to think about how do I work with people, how do I serve people who have historically been underserved, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. And how do I work with those who have benefited from the systems in place, sometimes intentionally, sometimes unintentionally. And I think when I'm working with folks and serving folks who are, the in the crosshairs of these systems, I think one of the most important things that I try to bring to the surface for everyone is that we've been fed this narrative that because we don't hold necessarily systemic power, because we don't look or live or love like the traditional power holders, we have no power. And that's just false, right? So I have a little bit of a background in social work. So that was my undergraduate study. I did about 3 years. I spent about 3 years practicing therapy in a few different settings. And one of the most important features that I was able to call upon was helping people understand and realize the strength that they had within themselves, right? Be it the strength to overcome obstacles, the strength to try something new, the strength to go out and, explore that dream that you had, right? But we have this collective and individual strength in us that doesn't get talked about enough. So on that side, I tend to try to help folks understand that there is a strength, tap into it. It might be scary, but that's okay. We do scary things all the time. And then on the other side of it, right, working with folks who are power holders or folks who have, elevated positions of privilege, helping them to understand how they can use their privilege and their platform to be an ally, right? So sometimes that means standing up and using some of that political and social capital that you've earned. Other times it might be sitting down and just listening, right? And maybe it's doing some work behind the scenes, right? So there are a number of different ways that folks can understand where they are in their journey, where they are in their process, but also where they stand in this power structure and how they can utilize and work from their sphere of influence to affect change that we want to see.
Mm, that's awesome, man. And, to kind of build up on that, I can tell you are, very involved in this space of DEI. And, we've all have heard such a strong push recently maybe over the past couple of years, where you have different groups or individuals who are kind of trying to eliminate like that whole term of diversity, equity, and
Yeah.
inclusion, or anything similar to that. So I'd like to just get your thoughts on that, and some ways you try to combat the negative stereotypes,
Yeah.
negative perspectives that are out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
How important is it for DEI work to continue within organizations?
Yeah. So, can I take a second to disaggregate DEI real quick?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because we tend to say that term DEI, right? It's almost its own word now. And we know, the three of us on this call, and many people know who are listening, that those terms mean very different things. There are a lot of folks, however, who use those terms interchangeably, and that's a problem, right? So when we're talking about diversity, and this is just Tehran's perspective, but when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about a numbers game, right? Who's there, who's not, right? Who's represented, who's got a seat at the table. If diversity were a dinner party, it would essentially be inviting people over to your house. People are going to have in and out groups, and there's going to be different things going on around the house. But really, it's just how many people came through the door and where they come from, where those people come from. And that's it, right? Once they get inside the house, we don't really understand or try to support or help anything else. The E then, so I think about equity, right? So if we talk about equity, equity is collecting folks' dietary restrictions before they come over, right? So I'm going to ask you that, okay, you don't eat pork, you are gluten free, you lactose intolerant. Cool. We can make sure that we have some stuff at the table for you so you feel welcome to at this dinner party. Inclusion, it's more like a potluck, right? So the potluck aspect of it is that, yeah, we'll have some stuff here for you, but I want you to also bring some of the more important things, the most important things to the table, and share that with us. We're going to share some of our stuff with you. And in that way, we can get to this next piece, which is belonging, right? We've been trying to strive for belonging, and that's the outcome, that's the feeling, that's the byproduct of DEI work. And I think we've talked about DEI from the perspective of, or many people have talked about it and bastardized it, and turned it into a buzzword that means we only help Black, brown, and gay people, right? That's how it's talked about. And we do those and we help those groups at the sacrifice of straight white folk, right? Um, and that's the fear mongering that happens that gets people to push something away and rally against it when they don't fully and truly understand it. And what I've been trying to get folks to understand is that inclusion includes everybody. Everybody is included in inclusion, right? I think about some of the work we've done in the insurance sector, for example. Um, the same DEI program that looks to create more equitable health outcomes in the inner city is the exact same program that ensures that there's resources out in rural Minnesota, so they have access to the care that they need. And if DEI goes away, all of that stuff goes away. So DEI has existed forever, and it exists across all different platforms, all different professions, all different spectrums, and everybody benefits from it. We just might call it something different. So I try to help folks understand that component of it, right? Like DEI isn't just for one or two groups. It's how we all, right? A rising tide lifts all ships, right? How do we make the system more equitable for everyone to have access to more positive outcomes?
Hmm.
So taking all that into consideration, how do you feel, or what is the importance of uh, you being a Black man in this field, in this career area of
Oh,
DEI?
that's a great question. I would say that and maybe this is a controversial or a hot take, right? Um, I think, when you go back over the years and you look at, the folks who tend to be highlighted in this struggle, right? It's usually Black men, right? You look at the civil rights pioneers and all those sorts of folks. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the role that Black women have played in this struggle. I can't tell you how many times Black women have saved us from things, and folks either never find out about it or they find out and they don't give the credit,
Yeah.
right? So for me to be able to be in this role and advocate and work in the way that I do, it's in a maybe direct, maybe indirect way of me showing up and supporting my sisters who are also heavy in this struggle, right? I think another thing that's important to call out too, though, is that um, this work of DEI takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of compassion, it takes a lot of care, it takes a lot of hand holding. And those are all, unfortunately, those are all components or aspects or characteristics that have never been given to us as Black men. So when we can show that we have that and we can do it to the nth degree of excellence, right? We begin to shift some of those narratives. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about narratives in a bit here, but like we begin to shift some of the narrative, right? When we can see that, oh, we can show up in this space and nurture and grow people in this way too, right? Um, baby steps, and by droplet, we get to shift things a bit. That narrative about who we are and what we can do and how we can show up and support.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer, man. That's really good, especially like how you said those characteristics aren't always given to us when you think about a Black man.
Yeah,
So I really appreciate that.
absolutely.
Can you kind of tell us a little bit about what motivates you each day? I mean, of course, I didn't know all of your background and, some of the different spaces you've been in. So it seems like, you've been in different spaces, but all kinds of come together in the umbrella of the work you're doing now. So what is the thing or things that keeps you motivated?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, and I mean maybe this is a softball for me, because is these folks back here, right? Um, the family is the motivation, to be quite honest. And I know that sometimes that answer is, first of all, I know it's cliche. I'm gonna call that out. I know that's a cliche response. Um, but when I think about my background, where I came from, what I came from, and where I find myself today and what I get to now provide for my family. How my family gets to experience the world, how they get to experience me, how I get to experience them. Um, I have such an appreciation for where I am today and where we are today because of the things that I've gone through. Right. And we can get into that a little bit later if y'all want to and if we got time. Um, but the other side of that coin is that I believe that I need to leave this place a little bit better than I found it for this next generation of people. Right. I firmly believe that my kids are significantly better people than I was at their age. They're so much more open. They're so much more caring. They don't just think about themselves. And I'd like to think that I played a little bit of a role in that, but on the off chance that I didn't, maybe I need to, exemplify what this equity piece, what this inclusion piece looks like. And I'll tell you one more thing. My kids, and to some degree my wife, um, they seem to look at me as if I have it all figured out, as if I'm a superhero, as if I'm bulletproof, as if I know, the next move before it even gets played. And y'all know, we know that it ain't, it might not be like that. It might not truly be that way, but I'm trying to be the person that they think I already am. Right. So I'm constantly trying to be the person that they think I am, which is never going to happen, which always gives me something to strive for.
Wow.
That's interesting because if you sort of expand on that a little bit, there's always misconceptions maybe from your family or
Yeah.
the society in general, right? What for Black men, what would be like what would be something that a misconception you would try to
Oh,
eradicate if you could about Black men?
man. The misconception that we are a threat.
Right.
period. Right? Like I think about some of the grace that is given to uh, some groups, right? You almost have to convince people that, if a bad thing happened, if a challenging thing happened, a terrible thing happened in society, um, you almost have to convince people that, it was a person from this group, right? Before you have the fact. We don't get that same grace sometimes, right? It's so easy to see us as a villain, right? If you told somebody to close your eyes and picture a gangster, right? Like 9 times out of 10, I would imagine at some point in their imagination, and in this thought process, they probably they think of someone who has a complexion similar to mine, similar to ours, right? And that's unfair, right? Because we're already working upstream. We're already fighting against the grain, right? So the misconception I would like to do away with is the idea that Black men are inherently violent. We don't nurture, right? We don't care.
Mm.
We don't have emotions. Um, and that sort is going to cut two ways though, because there's this societal piece of it where we have to acknowledge like, yep, you know what, society has placed a lot of this on us, right? And so we have to respond to it. And then on the other side of it, I would argue too that we have to give ourselves permission to not feel like we always have to be that guy, right? We don't always have to be on. We don't always have to be, this vigilant. Now, it's important to stay aware, right? But I think we have to give ourselves some grace too, to be vulnerable, to show emotion, to open up, right? Um, when I learned how to do that, when I learned how to convey my emotions and talk about them openly, um, it ended up being a game changer because I was experiencing this therapeutic interaction that I had never seen before. So, right, on the one side, society has to be better about not looking at us as threats. And on the other side of it, too, we got to make sure that we give ourselves the grace to be kind to ourselves and go out and seek the resources and supports and talk about the things that are going on inside.
Mm. I really like that answer, man. And you got me thinking about like I remember some years back I used to be in this place where I would not go anywhere alone. Like
Yeah,
I would ask my wife to come with me wherever to the Walmart or going out to Target or
that's
just
right.
kind of wherever I was going. And I would always say, hey, I don't want to be going places alone to where people think that I'm, like you said, a threat.
Yeah,
And I realize now, just kind of thinking back on that, how much I was putting myself in a box, and then
yeah,
also how much society had impacted me in that way. So
yeah,
as you were just saying that answer, it started getting me to think about that, and I was like, wow, it
yeah,
wasn't even something that I was thinking of in that way. But now looking back on it, I see how society had put that kind of a pressure on me to where I felt like I couldn't go anywhere alone.
yeah. Dr. Moore, do you remember when that flipped, that changed for you, and you realized what was happening there?
I think it actually changed after things happened with George Floyd.
Mm,
And I really feel like I kind of evolved from that point because I felt like at that point, one, I felt like it didn't matter one way or the other. You could be trying to do all those things
that's
and you
right.
still be mischaracterized or misjudged. But then two, I felt like, I had a duty to try to find a way to dispute
That's right.
that narrative, kind of like what you were saying. So I would say that's probably when everything kind of shifted a little
Yeah.
bit, and along with my wife kind of supporting me, kind of like what you were saying. She really encouraged me to do things differently, and
Yeah.
I used to have a low cut. You know what I'm saying? Like things
Yeah.
like that. She encouraged me to grow my hair out more, and
Yeah.
so like all of those things that I was putting those pressures on myself to say, hey, you can't do that and be in whatever space you're in,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that
Man,
was cool. So I appreciate your answer on that one,
that's
man.
powerful. That's powerful.
Yeah. And kind of, I guess to kind of piggyback off of that, in what ways do you feel that the portrayals of black men in like media contributes to these misconceptions that black men are to be feared and lack self-control and some of the things you already said?
Yeah. Man, that's a loaded question. I'm a baby of the 80s. So I had my formative years were in the 90s, right? Um, Boys in the Hood,
Mhm.
Menace to Society, right? Juice,
Yeah. Classics.
South Central, right? Like all those the movies for about a 15 year, 15, almost 20-year span. We didn't have any movies about Black joy.
Mhm.
All the movies were around gang violence,
Mhm.
drugs, a broken justice system, some tragedy that happens in the family, right?
Yeah.
We never got an opportunity to see joy in our stories on a big screen. If it did make it to TV or to the theaters, it was B-list, right? Or it was direct to VHS. VHS for the younger folk out there, before DVD and streaming, right? It was a little tape. Um, we didn't get to see those stories portrayed.
Yeah.
And then when you factor in music, right? That was the narrative push in a lot of the more popular hip hop. And here's the thing, when I say the more popular hip hop, I mean the hip hop that companies decided to push,
Right.
right? Because there was so much conscious rap that was happening, right? Rap that was talking about the struggle, rap that was talking about prosperity, talking about how to find a way out, how to spend your money, how to reinvest, all that. None of that was ever pushed,
Mhm.
right? Instead, we put out the content. They pushed forward the content that talked about killing, glorifying drugs, right? All those sorts of things that put our folks behind. And then it made its way to the suburbs. And then that was the narrative that got pushed around in communities that didn't have many people who looked like us in those communities. So they didn't have people to combat that narrative.
Yeah.
So that's what they saw. That's what they knew. Can't blame them for believing that that was what it was, because that what was pushed in front of them, and you don't know what you don't know until it's demonstrated in front of you. And so that's how we perpetuated that narrative. Now we're violent, right? We're drug addicts, right? You know, one of the things me and some of my homeboys constantly talk about was the fact that you had Halle Berry, one of the most acclaimed, um, talented, one of the smartest black actresses out there, and she was doing roles like losing Isaiah, right? She had to be a crackhead mother who was gonna lose her baby,
Yeah.
right? Like those are the roles that they had for us, right? Denzel Washington doesn't get an Oscar until he's a crooked cop in Training Day. That's wild to me, right? Like our stories, our stories are somehow not authentic until they are tragic.
Wow.
And that's what people see.
Right. Right. That's, and I think that's interesting. I mean, so you're from Chicago. My wife's from Chicago. You're from Chicago as
Yeah.
well. Do you find or have you found that there are either hurdles or obstacles, maybe seasons of adversity that you've had to overcome to be where you are today?
Oh, for sure. For sure. I mean, we could talk about like the geographic ones, right? The socioeconomic ones, right? Chicago, when I was growing up, there was very, very segregated, first and foremost, right? So, I grew up on, basically, right, like on the two streets that intersected together. If you were on this side of it, it was all black, and on this side of it, it was all Latino, right? I didn't have a white classmate until I was a sophomore in high school, maybe sophomore,
Wow.
something
Okay.
like that, right? Then I moved up to Minnesota, and then I met for the first time a multiracial person. I had never experienced that before in my life. That was a culture shock for me. I didn't know that happened. I didn't know people dated outside of their races. Didn't know that was a thing. Because that's not that didn't happen in Chicago. It just wasn't a thing. I think it happened out like in the suburbs, but like in the inner city area, it wasn't a thing for us. Um, it was never an opportunity or an option. How about that for us? So, you have that component of it. You have the socioeconomics where, you know, um, everything that was good was either moved downtown or to a suburb. So they created deserts of sorts, right? We had corner stores, but we didn't really have like major grocery stores like in my neighborhood, right? We had a hospital, but we didn't really have a bank in our neighborhood, right? Like we never had like those pillars all together in one spot. We never had a hospital, school, bank, and grocery store, like major grocery store, all in the same area. You always had to travel, right? So that created this like desert for us there. And then if I think about like mentally, I'll fast forward into adult life, and my wife and I have worked through this a ton. Uh, I still, to this day, struggle with what a lot of people will call like imposter syndrome. Every day when I'm signing off, I'm asking like, did I do enough? Did I make enough of a change? Did I impact enough? Um, it's the question that keeps me up at night. Right? It's one of the first things I'll think about in the morning. And even though people are telling me, right, even though the numbers will show that we are making progress, I'll still ask myself, well, is it enough? Is it enough? Is it enough? And the problem, I think the reason for that is because the work that I'm doing, the work that we're doing, we're already so far behind the eight ball that time doesn't always feel like a luxury that we have, right? So we want to move fast, we want to move efficiently, and we want to move big. And it's really challenging when you have to fight against systems that have been set up and created in a way that really don't want to change. And so that imposter syndrome creeps in, and we have to remind ourselves, I got to remind myself, right? Like, you know, journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, right? All the little cliche sort of things that you have to say to yourself to remind yourself to keep moving forward. Um, so I could tell you more, but I don't know if we got enough time for that.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So now if you had to write out, your life's mission statement,
Oh man.
whether that's one sentence, one phrase, whatever, what would you say, if someone were asking you that question?
You know, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm keep it 100% real. I've been asked this question a couple times, and every time I'll give an answer, and then when I'm done, my answer changes. Right? Like
Yeah.
I don't love or I love the answer, or so here's how I've kind of navigated that question now. Um, and it's not necessarily a mission statement, it's more like a mantra, right? And we've heard it all, but we've heard it before, right? Like if you stay ready, you don't have to get ready,
Yeah.
right? Combination of that, and our liberation is bound up in one another. So, when I do better, you do better,
Yeah.
right? When you do better, I do better. It's communal, right? So whenever I'm able to write that mission statement that I actually love, it's going to be rooted in community, right? It's going to be rooted in knowing that it's not, even though it might be Tehran's mission statement, it doesn't only apply to Tehran. It doesn't only apply to his household, right? It's going to be something that is wrapped up in our shared liberation and something that advances all of our common good.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to send you an email or something with some loose thoughts because I'm still figuring that one out for myself, to be quite
Yeah.
honest.
No, that's good, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Right. Given just obviously the work in DEI and your family as a whole, and just what you do, what does success look like? What is it? How do you
Mm,
feel that you're ending your day successful, your life right now? What does
yeah.
success look like?
Yeah. That gets back to that first question, that previous question about imposter syndrome, right? But imposter syndrome will have me thinking that we didn't do anything today, right? We didn't achieve anything. And I have to remind myself that again, because of systems, because of the historical context, because of the political context that we find ourselves doing this work, our target a lot of time now there are tons of metrics out there, right? We can demonstrate how we impacted this statistic, that statistic, so on and so forth. But then there's also the gray area, right? How do we help people feel welcome? How do we help people feel like they can show up authentically? How do we help people believe that, they're not perpetuating um, harm of their ancestors, right? Both from the people who've been impacted, victims of the harm, and ancestors who've perpetuated the harm. How do we stop that, right? It's hard to know when you've made strides in those arenas. And, again, right, you got the metrics. We can look at the numbers all day and we can talk about how, more diverse companies outperform, less diverse competitors. They're more likely to, innovate more efficiently and effectively. They're more likely to capture new audience. They're more likely to attract new talent, right? There's data out there to support every single claim that I just made. On the other side of it, right, we got to ask ourselves, right, it might not be perfect. Did we make it better? We picked it up where it is. Did it get better? Is it getting better? We could benchmark some of that better, right? Like what it was a year ago, is it better 6 months later? And this is how we measure that. All right, 6 months later, this is how we measure that. But it's a little more squishy, right? So on the metric side, we got the numbers. And then on the, more qualitative side, it's okay, do we make it better? How do we know we're making it better? If we're not making it better, let's go talk to the people, right? We know that we are the stewards of our own solution. Like we know what the solutions are. We understand our problems. We uniquely understand our problems, and we know what solutions would help us tackle them. You got to work with community, with and in community, right? And trust that that community knows what they need. And then as allies and advocates, we have to help run with that baton with that community when they want us to be
Right.
to clarify.
Man, I really love that mantra that you just gave. Like, I'm already thinking about it in my head. Like, it may not be perfect, but did we make it better? And, that's something that I'm gonna definitely take with me throughout the rest of this year and then going into, next year. But, you know, I'm thinking about like all of the things you said and, just the impact that you've made, and I'm curious to know like what ways are you giving back to the community? I know you probably
Mm,
do a lot of stuff through work, but maybe even if there's volunteer things or ways you serve on boards or whatever that may
yeah.
look like. Could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So it's funny. So you provide me with this question beforehand, and I was sitting with my wife, and I was like, how do I talk about like the things that we do? Because I'm a firm believer too that like I I try my best, and like all things, we fail. I try my best not to virtue signal, right? Like I try my best not to be like, I'm such an ally to women. Somebody want to pat me on the back for that real quick. You saw that thing I did for women? You saw that thing I did for women, right? Like I try my best to not show up in that way. And so I tend to like play those cards really close to the chest, or hold those cards really close to the chest. But what I can say is that there is no shortage of ways in which I and we can be in community, right? So, serving on boards. I've served on, a couple boards, school boards, community boards. I lived in a homeless shelter when I moved up to Minnesota, and I ended up serving on their board for a year or two. So you can serve in the boards, you can, give back athletically, right? So many talented athletic minds out there to shape up these young athletes, right? And when I think about sports, especially in our community, it does so much more than just change the score on a board, right? We learn teamwork and leadership and how to take a loss, right? How to bounce back. We learn so much through athletics, and it's not necessarily what's happening on the floor, but sometimes it's how that coach has guided you through those things, right? None of us know how to lose until somebody helps guide us through a loss, and how do we bounce back? It takes a very special person to be able to do something like that. Officiating, right? Referees, we need those folks too, right? To help us understand and learn the rules of the game and how to advance. Um, there's opportunities to, volunteer, get into the schools, right? Community centers have tutoring opportunities, right? Mentors, big brothers, there's no shortage of ways, right? And so I've tried to dip my hand into all of those sorts of things. I've tried to bring my family along with me as well. And as the kids get older, they're gonna, start to, tag along a little bit more. But with where we find ourselves today, um, I don't think anyone is going to shoo away folks who want to help lift some of the load of doing this work of guiding this next generation up and out of some of these trying situations they find themselves in.
So, thinking about, the name of this podcast, changing the narrative.
Mm.
From your perspective, what should the narrative be about what it means to be a Black man in today's
Ooh,
culture and society?
that's a fantastic question. And like three terms popped into my mind. I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna contradict myself after I say this real quick, right? I'm gonna just open with that. Um, the resilience of Black men, right? Some of us are quite literally having crap thrown at us on a daily basis. Most of us are mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, being, having a barrage of things thrown our way that we have to try to navigate, right? Um, and we still haven't sat down yet. And I'm talking about this has been a couple 100 years long experiment trying to get us to sit down, and we still haven't. Black men, the Black community is resilient to the nth degree. However, here's the contradicting part. I don't want us to always be seen as resilient because to be
Right.
seen as resilient means that you have to go through terrible stuff, right? To be resilient, you have to survive something. We shouldn't have to always survive stuff. We need an opportunity to thrive in our spaces, right? So I think if I could change the narrative or what the narrative should be, I would say that Black men, and this is going to be a shocker to all three of us on the call after I say this, Black men are just like other men. We have fears, we have love, we got passion and conviction, we got dreams. We feel like, sometimes we can't make it. Sometimes we want to cry. Sometimes we want to laugh. You want to frolic in the field. Let's go. Sometimes you want to lay on a couch and just sulk. Just like everybody else, we are human too. And it's such a weird and basic thing to say, but somebody needs to hear it.
Yeah.
That we are normal, like we are human, and we are just as much a part of the human experience and condition that everyone else is. And I think if we are extended that understanding, that level of humanity, we solve like 50% of the issue at the very least, right? 50% of the issues get solved by being able to look at me, to look at us and say, dang, like they got very human stuff happening too. How can we show up for them? How can we show up with them? And then maybe we don't have to be so resilient.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
I hear that.
Very good answer, man. Very good answer. I mean, you said some impactful stuff, man. Just, in the time that we've been here, and I'm sure that there's people out here who are either gonna watch this on YouTube or listen to it in the
Mm,
audio, and they may want to connect with you. So, are there ways people can connect with you if they want to learn more about just the DEI space, or if they want to learn more about what it means to be an ally, or how to even get
yeah,
involved in some of that work? What are
yeah,
some ways that they can reach out and connect or follow you on social media or anything like that?
yeah, yeah. I will never ever gatekeep. I promise. I will never gatekeep. If something's working for me, I'm willing and happy to share with anybody who wants to explore it or who wants to partner in it. With that being said, I am the most vanilla and plain person when it comes to social media presences. I got a Facebook page and I got a LinkedIn page, right? And and if you follow my Facebook page, you see that most of the things that end up getting posted in my name, my wife is tagging me and stuff. So I don't have a very active social media presence, but I will say LinkedIn. I am on LinkedIn. If folks ever want to connect, it's just Teron Buford, first name, last name, Teron B as in boy, Uford as in dog. Um, And you can catch me there. And then also, I don't know if folks ever reach out to y'all to reconnect with guests, but if they do, you can feel free to like share my email address with folks. I'm more than happy to connect. I wouldn't post it online, but like if folks reach out and they say, hey, can I reach out to that brother? Is there a good way to reach out to him? Yeah, feel free to share my email.
Awesome. No, yeah, we'll definitely do that. Well, thank you for being a guest on the podcast and for helping to continue to work with us in this mission of trying to change the narrative of what it means to be a Black man in our society today. Carl and I, we're excited about just where the podcast is heading, and we're happy to have you be a part of the journey. So we really appreciate you for being a guest on the show, and looking forward to all the things you're going to continue to do in your community.
Man, just real quick, thank you for having me. Thank you for thinking that I'm worthy enough to be here and share a message. But more importantly, right, thank you for what y'all are doing. This is meaningful work that we don't see represented, and at least not to the degree that we should. And so I'm appreciative of y'all, like you brothers out here doing the work, advancing the cause, and elevating the voices. So I'm greatly appreciative of what y'all are doing and how y'all are operating from your spheres.
Appreciate that.
We appreciate it.